It was the kind of night that quiet towns fear, when the wind screamed through the trees and frost painted every window in white. The highway outside the old town lay empty except for a single pair of headlights cutting through the dark. Leah walked home from her night shift at the diner, her breath turning to mist in the air, her coat too thin for the cold. She hated that road. It was lonely and endless, lined with dead grass and frozen mud. But tonight, she would remember it for the rest of her life. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw it happen. The blur of a speeding car, the sudden flash of metal, the sound of shattering glass followed by the roar of fire. Without thinking, she dropped her bag and ran. The wreck had flipped off the road and hit a tree. The hood was smoking, flames spreading fast. Inside, a man hung half-conscious over the steering wheel, his face covered in blood, his eyes barely open. Leah screamed for help, but there was no one. She pulled at the door, it was jammed. Her hands burned as she tugged harder, metal biting into her skin. The man inside coughed weakly, whispering something she couldn't understand. The smell of gasoline filled the air. For a moment, she hesitated, fear choking her. But then she saw the flicker of fire crawling toward the tank and knew she didn't have time. She braced herself, kicked the window, and climbed halfway inside. Her arms wrapped around his chest, dragging him out inch by inch. He was heavier than she thought, dressed in a torn business suit, his phone shattered near his feet. When she finally pulled him free, they fell together onto the cold dirt. The car behind them erupted into a ball of flames, the blast knocking her backward. She shielded his body with hers, glass raining down around them. She lay there shaking, holding him, feeling his heartbeat weak but steady against her chest. "Stay awake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Help is coming." But there was no sound except the crackle of the burning car. She tore off her scarf and pressed it against his wound. His eyes flickered open for a second. In that moment, their gaze met, his full of pain, hers full of stubborn will. He tried to speak, but no words came out, only blood and breath. Blue lights finally appeared in the distance, sirens cutting through the wind. When the paramedics came running, she barely remembered what happened next. Someone pulled her away. Someone shouted her name. Then everything went dark. When Leah woke up in the hospital, her hands were bandaged, her body sore. The nurse said she'd passed out from smoke and exhaustion. "You saved that man's life," the nurse told her with a smile. "He was in bad shape, but you pulled him out before the car exploded." Leah tried to ask about him, his name, where he went, but the nurse shook her head. "He left," she said. "No name, no word. Just gone." Leah never saw him again. She told herself it didn't matter, that she did what any decent person would do. But sometimes, late at night, she'd remember that faint look in his eyes and wonder who he was, and why he never came back. Years passed, and the memory faded like an old photograph. Leah's life became a routine of bills, work, and quiet evenings. She lived in a rundown house her late father had left behind, in a neighborhood ruled by an HOA that treated her like an outsider. The HOA president, Mrs. Kendall, had a smile that could cut glass. She fined Leah for everything. For her old fence, for the color of her curtains, for parking her car a few inches too far from the curb. Leah paid when she could, argued when she had to, and endured it all because she had nowhere else to go. The other residents pretended to be friendly but whispered behind her back. She was the poor girl in a wealthy neighborhood, tolerated but never respected. The winters grew harsher and the town older. Leah took extra shifts at the diner, barely scraping by. Sometimes she'd stand by the window at night, looking at the streetlights flickering outside, wondering how her life had shrunk to this small corner of the world. She never married, never left. The people who once promised to help her were gone. Even her neighbors stopped greeting her, afraid of the HOA's cold authority. Yet through it all, she stayed kind, feeding stray cats, helping old Mrs. Grant down the street when no one else would. Then one morning, everything changed. Leah was sweeping her porch when she heard the sound. Engines, deep and heavy, rolling through the quiet lanes. She looked up to see a convoy of black SUVs entering the subdivision, their tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. The sound of tires on gravel drew everyone out of their houses. Curtains moved. Doors opened. The HOA president, Mrs. Kendall, came rushing out in her expensive robe, waving at the cars as if greeting royalty. Leah frowned, clutching her broom tighter. No one important ever came here. The SUVs stopped in front of the old HOA office, a small building at the edge of the park. The lead door opened slowly, and out stepped a tall man in a dark coat. He moved with quiet authority, surrounded by men in black suits wearing earpieces. Even from across the street, Leah could tell he wasn't just another visitor. His presence changed the air. People went silent, curious, nervous. Mrs. Kendall hurried to greet him, her tone syrupy sweet. "Mr. Cross, it's such an honor to have you here. We didn't know you'd be visiting in person." The man didn't reply at first. He looked around slowly, his sharp eyes studying the street, the houses, the faces watching from behind windows. Then his gaze stopped on Leah. She froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. There was something familiar about him, something in the way he stood, in the calm, unreadable look on his face. But it couldn't be. The memory of that night flickered in her mind like a ghost. The fire, the blood, the eyes that looked at her through the smoke. He took a step forward, and her heart began to race. He was older now, his features harder, dressed in a suit that looked like it cost more than her house. Yet she recognized that gaze, the same quiet storm she saw in the man she had pulled from the wreck years ago. Mrs. Kendall kept talking, trying to impress him, but he barely looked at her. He turned instead toward Leah's house, his steps measured, his guards keeping distance. The crowd whispered. Leah stood on her porch, too stunned to move. When he stopped at her gate, the silence became heavy, the kind that made people forget to breathe. His voice, when it came, was calm but cold, each word cutting through the air. "You once saved a stranger's life, Miss Leah," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I'm here to return the favor." Leah's mouth went dry. The neighbors exchanged confused looks. Mrs. Kendall's fake smile faltered. The man, Ethan Cross, as everyone would later whisper, wasn't just anyone. He was one of the richest men in the state, a billionaire who owned half the real estate companies in the region, a man known for building empires and breaking rivals. And he was standing at Leah's old gate, speaking as if he'd known her forever. He glanced at the HOA board members clustered nearby and added quietly, "Starting today, this neighborhood belongs to me." The words dropped like a bomb. Mrs. Kendall blinked, stammering, What do you mean?" Ethan turned his gaze on her, and even she, the woman who bullied everyone, took a step back. "I mean," he said, "your HOA, your rules, your control. It's over." Leah could barely process what she was hearing. Around her, people began whispering again, some in shock, others in awe. The man she had once saved was now powerful enough to buy the whole neighborhood, and apparently he already had. He turned back to her, his expression unreadable, but there was a strange weight in his eyes, something between gratitude and vengeance. For the first time, she wondered if saving him all those years ago had changed her life, or doomed it. That night, as she sat by her window, watching the black SUVs still parked along the street, she couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. The HOA office lights were on late, and Mrs. Kendall's car was gone. Men in suits walked the sidewalks, taking notes, measuring, mapping. Leah's heart pounded with unease. She thought of Ethan's calm voice, the cold promise in his words. "Starting today, this neighborhood belongs to me." She didn't know what he wanted, or what returning the favor really meant, but deep down, she sensed one thing. It wasn't kindness that brought him back here. It was something else, something darker, something unthinkable. The next morning came quiet, too quiet for the neighborhood that usually buzzed with gossip and complaints about lawns and fences. But now, no one dared to speak above a whisper. Black SUVs still lined the street, and men in suits moved like shadows, checking corners, snapping pictures, marking things with small red flags. Leah stood by her window, watching as if trying to convince herself this was real. The stranger she once dragged from fire was now walking through her world as if it already belonged to him. Ethan Cross. The name was everywhere now, on the news, in business magazines, on everyone's lips. But to her, he wasn't a story. He was a memory she never wanted to face again. A face tied to one night of smoke, blood, and fear. And now that face was here, walking her street, looking too calm for someone who claimed to be returning a favor. Leah tried to go on with her morning, pretending life was normal. She made coffee, washed her small dishes, and tried not to think about the expensive black car parked near her gate. But the knock came anyway, sharp and measured. When she opened the door, one of Ethan's men stood there. Tall, expressionless, wearing sunglasses even though the sky was cloudy. "Mr. Cross would like a word," he said. His tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't a request either. Leah hesitated, clutching her mug, then nodded slowly. He led her down the short path toward the HOA office, which now looked nothing like it had yesterday. The old sign was gone, the flag taken down, and a new temporary banner hung in its place. Cross Development Holdings. Inside, Mrs. Kendall was already there, her perfect hair slightly out of place for the first time Leah had ever seen. She was talking too fast, trying to sound important, her voice trembling just a little. Ethan sat behind the old HOA desk, calm, reading a file as if none of this chaos mattered. When Leah walked in, his eyes lifted to meet hers. It wasn't the look of a stranger anymore. It was the look of someone who remembered everything but chose not to explain. He stood up slowly, the light from the window outlining him like a shadow carved from glass. "Miss Leah," he said, his voice steady. "Thank you for coming." Mrs. Kendall started to speak, desperate to regain control, but Ethan lifted his hands slightly and she fell silent. His attention was entirely on Leah. "You may not remember much about that night," he said softly, "but I do. Every second of it." Leah swallowed hard, not knowing what to say. "You saved my life, and for a long time I didn't know how to face that. I had nothing then, no money, no power, no family. But I swore that if I ever stood on my feet again, I'd return what I owed." He paused, his gaze sharpening. "And now I can." The room felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls were closing in. Leah looked around at the people watching her, the suits, the board members, even Mrs. Kendall pretending to smile. "I didn't do it for anything," Leah said quietly. "You don't owe me." Ethan's lips curved in something between a smile and a warning. "Maybe not, but I owe myself something. Closure." He turned to the board members. "As of this morning, I have legally acquired all existing properties held under this HOA's management. The deeds, the debts, the land, it's all mine now, which means everything you own." His eyes flicked to Mrs. Kendall. "And everything you control now belongs to me." The silence was deafening. Leah could hear her own heartbeat. Mrs. Kendall stuttered, trying to laugh. "Mr. Cross, surely there's been a misunderstanding." "The HOA?" Ethan interrupted without raising his voice. "The HOA," he said, "has no authority anymore. It's dissolved. You've run this place for years like a kingdom, but that ends today." He looked at Leah again. "You see, I didn't just come here for you. I came here for what this place represents." His tone was calm, almost too calm, and that made it worse. Mrs. Kendall's face drained of color. "You can't just take over everything," she snapped. "People live here. Families." Ethan leaned back in the chair that once belonged to her. "You took over their lives long ago," he said, almost whispering. "You fined them, humiliated them, made them pay for breathing. I read every report, every complaint that came through your office. You destroyed more peace than you ever protected." Then he stood, buttoning his coat. "Now I'll rebuild it my way." Leah watched all of it in silence, unsure what to feel. Gratitude? Fear? Confusion? The man she once saw broken and helpless was now untouchable, moving people with a single word. But something about his eyes unsettled her. There was no warmth, no joy of reunion, only calculation. When he passed by her, she caught a faint scent of smoke and rain. like the night she pulled him from the fire. He stopped briefly beside her and said quietly, "You'll understand soon enough." After he left, Mrs. Kendall turned on Leah with venom. "What did you do?" she hissed. "Why is he here? Why you?" Leah shook her head. "I don't know." But even as she said it, doubt stirred inside her. What if he was here because of her? What if this wasn't about business at all? Outside, people had gathered, whispering rumors. Some said he was building a new luxury project. Others that he was shutting everything down. Workers unloaded boxes, blueprints, survey equipment. Signs of something big, something unstoppable. Leah returned home, her head spinning. She sat by her window again, staring at the street that suddenly didn't feel like hers anymore. The sound of hammers and drills echoed from the distance. That night, as darkness settled, she saw the first lights go up at the old community center. Trucks arrived with fences and heavy machinery. Ethan stood at the edge of it all, hands in pockets, talking quietly with his men. Leah couldn't hear what he said, but his face was unreadable, cold. The kind of face that carried a plan no one else could guess. At dinner, Leah barely ate. Every few minutes she glanced outside, expecting another car to pull up, another surprise to hit her door. Around 10, she finally went out for air. The street was nearly empty except for a guard at the corner, watching silently. "Evening," Leah said nervously. The man nodded once but didn't smile. Something about the stillness made her uneasy. When she turned back toward her gate, she saw a dark figure standing by it, Ethan. He looked completely out of place among the small houses, his presence too big for the narrow road. "You shouldn't walk alone this late," he said. His tone wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel either. It was controlled like everything else about him. Leah folded her arms. "You shouldn't be here." He looked at her porch, the peeling paint, the cracked steps. "I used to live in a house like this," he said quietly, "before they took it from us." Leah frowned. "Who did?" He turned his head slightly toward the HOA office glowing in the distance. "People like them." She didn't know what to say. He looked at her again, softer this time. "You saved me when I had nothing. Maybe you thought I'd forget. I didn't. But some debts," he said, his voice dropping, "can only be paid by changing everything around them." Leah's chest tightened. "What are you planning to do here?" Ethan smiled faintly, almost sadly. "You'll see. But don't be afraid, Leah. I won't hurt you. I could never hurt you." Then he stepped back into the dark, disappearing into the sound of engines starting. Leah stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. There was something haunting about the way he said it. Not like a promise, but like a warning wrapped in mercy. She went back inside, locking the door, but sleep never came. The next morning, she found a white envelope under her door. Inside was a single line, written in neat handwriting. "Your kindness once saved a life. Let it save you again." By noon, the bulldozers arrived. The HOA office was fenced off. Workers carried out furniture, papers, computers, all of it dumped into trucks. The sign that had once ruled over the town was crushed under a tire. People gathered in disbelief, shouting questions, demanding answers, but no one from Ethan's team spoke. They just worked in silence, efficient and cold. From her porch, Leah watched Mrs. Kendall's perfect face crack into rage. "He can't do this," she screamed to anyone who would listen. "I'll sue him. I'll call the county." But her voice was swallowed by the sound of engines and falling walls. Leah couldn't look away. For the first time, the people who had controlled everything were powerless. The order of their world was collapsing, and the man tearing it down was the same one she once saved. Yet, deep inside, Leah felt no joy, just unease. The way Ethan moved, the way he spoke, the way he looked at her. It wasn't revenge she saw, and it wasn't kindness. It was something else entirely, something that hid behind his quiet words. When night came again, lights shone from the construction site, bright against the dark. Leah sat by the window, staring at the reflection of her own face in the glass. Behind it, she saw him, Ethan, standing near the center of the road, looking up at her window from the shadows. He didn't wave, didn't speak, just stood there silent and still. Then, without a word, he turned away and vanished into the darkness once more. And that was when Leah finally realized the man she had saved might not have come back to repay a debt. He might have come back to rewrite everything that had ever been taken from him. And her neighborhood was only the beginning. By morning, the whole neighborhood buzzed like a nest struck by a stick. The usual calm streets, where gossip and garden talk ruled, had turned into chaos. Cars lined the sidewalks, people stood in clusters whispering nervously, and every pair of eyes kept drifting toward the construction site at the end of the road. The sound of drilling and engines filled the air, breaking the quiet peace that once defined their mornings. The HOA members, usually dressed in pressed shirts and smug smiles, now moved around in panic, clutching folders and phones, their confidence melting away with every rumble of heavy machinery. Mrs. Kendall's perfect hair was frizzy, her face red as she shouted orders that no one obeyed anymore. For the first time in years, she wasn't in control. She called for an emergency meeting at the community center, but half of the members didn't show up. Some were afraid, others simply didn't care anymore. The power that once held everyone by the throat had vanished overnight, and the man responsible for it, Ethan Cross, hadn't even raised his voice. He just signed papers and let the weight of his money do the rest. Leah watched all of it from her porch, unsure whether to be relieved or terrified. She saw neighbors who had once ignored her now looking at her differently, as if she somehow held answers. A few even whispered that she was working with Ethan, that she must have known him before. She tried to ignore them, but their eyes followed her everywhere she went. She could feel suspicion growing like a shadow. Late that afternoon, she went to the diner for her shift, but even there, people asked questions she couldn't answer. Is it true he bought the whole neighborhood? Is it true he's tearing everything down? Why's he talking to you, Leah? She smiled weakly and said she didn't know, but their stares didn't soften. It was as if she'd become part of some strange story no one understood yet. When she walked home that evening, the air felt heavy. The sun was low, painting the street in orange light. Workers still moved around with clipboards, marking houses, measuring property lines. She noticed small red X marks on several fences, including her own. Her stomach tightened. She followed the sound of voices toward the HOA office, now surrounded by fencing. Mrs. Kendall was there, waving papers and arguing with one of Ethan's men. "You can't do this," she snapped. "These houses are protected by association law." The man didn't even look at her. "Ma'am, your association no longer exists." His tone was polite, almost bored. All authority was transferred to Cross Holdings as of yesterday morning. She stood frozen, mouth open, watching as the last remnants of her power slipped away. Leah wanted to feel sympathy, but she couldn't. She remembered every fine, every insult, every time Mrs. Kendall called her a charity case in front of others. Seeing her helpless was almost satisfying, but the unease inside Leah didn't go away. Something about Ethan's silence, his calm dominance, didn't feel right. This wasn't just business, it was something deeper, something personal. That night, the streetlights flickered as a storm rolled in. Leah sat by her window again, the rain tapping softly against the glass. Across the street, she saw men carrying more equipment into the fenced area. She saw the glint of steel, the glare of lights, the shifting silhouettes of guards watching the neighborhood. Then she saw him again, Ethan, standing in the rain without an umbrella, hands in his pockets, staring up at the houses as if studying each one carefully. For a moment, she thought about stepping outside, asking him why he was doing this, what he really wanted. But fear kept her frozen. The memory of his calm eyes and that strange promise, "You'll understand soon enough," echoed in her mind. As lightning flashed, she caught sight of something else. A row of survey maps pinned under a plastic sheet near the site. She couldn't see clearly, but one word stood out, written in bold red ink: demolition. Her heart skipped. She pressed closer to the window, her breath fogging the glass. They weren't just renovating, they were preparing to destroy everything. The homes, the park, even the little playground by the lake. She stepped back, her pulse racing. If that was true, then no one here would have a home soon, not even her. The next morning, panic spread faster than the storm had. People flooded the HOA office, demanding answers. But the guards blocked the entrance, letting no one through. Rumors turned into fear, and fear turned into anger. Some residents tried calling lawyers. Others called news stations. But Ethan's company moved quietly, sealing deals and sending out letters. Within hours, thick envelopes appeared in every mailbox. Legal notices announcing the redevelopment phase of the community. They promised fair compensation, relocation options, and priority housing in the new cross estates. The words sounded generous, but the meaning was clear. They were being pushed out. Mrs. Kendall stormed to Leah's door around noon, soaking wet from the drizzle, waving one of the letters like a weapon. "You!" she shouted, pointing at Leah. "You're behind this. He's doing this for you, isn't he? You brought him here." Leah shook her head, backing up a step. "No, I didn't. I didn't even know he was coming." But Mrs. Kendall's face twisted in fury. "Don't lie to me. You've been his spy this whole time, haven't you? You poor people always find a way to ruin things." Leah wanted to slam the door, but something in the older woman's voice made her pause. It wasn't just anger, it was fear. For the first time, Mrs. Kendall looked truly terrified. "You don't understand," Leah said quietly. "He's not doing this for anyone. He's doing it for something else." Mrs. Kendall froze. "What do you mean?" Leah sighed. "I think he's angry. I think this place hurt him somehow." The woman blinked, confused, then laughed bitterly. "Everyone's angry, dear, but no one gets to tear down an entire neighborhood for it." She turned away, clutching her letter, muttering under her breath. By evening, police cars arrived, not to stop Ethan's men but to ensure order. That was when people realized how serious it was. No one was going to save them. Ethan had planned everything too perfectly, moved too fast. Every legal step, every paper was already signed. He wasn't just rich, he was powerful enough to move governments. Leah watched as the officers stood quietly while trucks moved in, tearing down signs, clearing debris, setting up new posts. A few of the older residents cried. The street that once smelled of flowers and barbecues now smelled of diesel and dust. Leah didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the word demolition flashing in her mind. Around midnight, she heard movement outside again. Curiosity overpowered fear, and she slipped on her coat, stepping quietly onto her porch. The street was dim, lit only by a few work lamps. She walked closer to the site, the sound of rain soft on her hood. That's when she noticed a figure standing by the fence, watching the machines. Ethan again, alone, unmoving. She hesitated, then whispered, "Why are you doing this?" He turned slowly, his eyes catching the faint light. "You shouldn't be here, Leah," he said calmly. "Go home." But she didn't move. "You're scaring everyone," she said. "You're destroying their homes." He looked back at the construction site. "Homes can be rebuilt, but what was taken from me can't." His tone was distant, almost hollow. "They burned my life down once. I'm just returning the favor." Leah felt a chill deeper than the rain. "What did they do to you?" she asked softly. He didn't answer, just stared at the ground for a moment before saying, "You wouldn't believe it if I told you." He turned to leave, but she called after him. "You could stop this. You have the power now. You don't have to hurt anyone." He stopped, his shoulders stiffening. "Hurt?" he murmured. "They don't even know what that word means." Then he disappeared into the storm, leaving her alone with the sound of thunder rolling over the town. When morning came, half the HOA board had already resigned. The community website was shut down. The local paper published a headline, "Cross Holdings begins suburban redevelopment project." But none of them mentioned the fear, the shouting, or the families quietly packing their things. They didn't mention the single woman standing on her porch, watching her world collapse around her while trying to understand the man who caused it. Leah sat on her steps, clutching the eviction notice she found in her mailbox that morning. Her name printed neatly at the top, her house labeled for removal in 3 weeks. She felt anger rising, confusion twisting in her chest. Why her? Why now? Why here? She thought saving a man's life was something good, something pure. But now it felt like a curse that had come back years later, wearing a suit and a smile. That night, she decided to find answers. She waited until the workers left, until the lights dimmed, then slipped out quietly, her flashlight trembling in her hand. She climbed the side fence of the construction site, slipping between shadows, her shoes crunching on gravel. Inside one of the temporary offices, a folder lay open on the desk. She flipped through the papers, survey maps, legal contracts, purchase agreements. Then she found a photograph clipped to one of the pages. It showed a house, old, familiar. A house that used to stand at the far end of the neighborhood before it was replaced by the park years ago. On the back of the photo, written in faded ink, were the words, "Our home," before they took it. Her hand trembled. She looked at the signature beneath Ethan's. Her breath caught. It was true. This wasn't just business. The HOA had destroyed his family once, maybe in this very place, and now he had come back not to rebuild, but to erase their legacy. She stepped back, the flashlight shaking in her grip. Outside, the rain started again, soft but relentless. For the first time, she understood the depth of what she'd seen in his eyes. Not anger alone, but something colder, sharper. A man with everything in the world, but still haunted by what was taken from him. Leah ran home through the rain, heart pounding, her clothes soaked through. Behind her, the lights from the site glowed brighter, machines roaring back to life even in the storm. As she closed her door, lightning flashed across the window, and for a brief second, she thought she saw a silhouette standing at the corner, watching, waiting, motionless. She turned off her lights and sat on the floor, breathing hard. She didn't know what was coming next, but she could feel it in her bones. Whatever Ethan's plan was, it was far from over. And when it reached its end, it wouldn't just change the neighborhood. It would change everything. Leah barely slept that night, the storm outside pounding against her windows as if the sky itself wanted to warn her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that photograph again. The small house, the faded words written on the back, Ethan's name beneath it. She could still smell the paper, old and damp, carrying the weight of a past he'd never escaped. He hadn't just bought the neighborhood to rebuild it. He bought it to destroy what once destroyed him. When morning finally came, the rain had stopped, but the world outside looked washed out and silent, as if waiting for something to happen. Leah stepped onto her porch, her shoes crunching against the wet gravel. The air smelled of mud and fuel. The workers were already back, moving like machines themselves, pulling down the last of the old playground near the park. The swings where children once laughed now hung twisted and broken. She watched as a bulldozer crushed the last bench her father had once painted when she was a child. Every sound echoed in her chest like a drumbeat. Across the street, she saw Ethan again, standing with his team near a cluster of blueprints spread over a truck hood. He wore a black coat that caught the wind, his hair slightly damp from the morning mist. He looked like a man carved from stone, cold, unreadable, untouchable. When their eyes met, she felt a shiver travel down her spine. He nodded once, not a greeting, but a silent acknowledgement, before turning back to his plans. Something inside her snapped. She couldn't watch anymore. She crossed the street, her heart hammering with anger and confusion. One of the guards stepped forward, but Ethan raised a hand and stopped him. Leah walked right up to him, her voice shaking but strong. "You lied to me," she said. "You said you came here to return a favor. You said you wouldn't hurt anyone." Ethan looked at her, calm as ever. "And I haven't," he said quietly. "Not yet." Leah's breath caught. "You're tearing everything down. People are losing their homes." He tilted his head slightly, almost studying her. "Homes," he repeated, his voice soft but sharp. "Do you know what that word meant to me, Leah? When I was 10, this was where my parents lived. They built a life here. My father worked 3 jobs to buy that little house at the end of the street, the one they tore down to make your park. He loved this place, Until one day, he couldn't pay an HOA fee, $20. His eyes darkened. They fined him, humiliated him, and when he fought back, they evicted us. My mother got sick after that. My father lost everything. I left this place with nothing but ashes and hate. Leah felt her throat tighten. So this is revenge? She whispered. Ethan smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. Call it whatever you like. I call it justice. He turned to his men. We start phase 2 tonight. They nodded and began loading more boxes. Leah looked down at the plans, catching a glimpse of the words Demolition Zone B, residential sector. Her stomach turned. You can't do this, she said. There are children here, families. People who had nothing to do with what happened to you. Ethan's eyes softened for just a second. No one here is innocent, Leah. They let it happen. They watched what the HOA did to others for years. No one stopped them. His voice was calm but heavy, each word carrying weight. You were the only one who helped someone without asking for anything. That's why I'm warning you now. Leave before it's too late. Leah took a step back, her mind spinning. You want me to leave my home? Ethan's tone was steady. You call it home. I call it the place where my family died in shame. I can't build my future on top of their graves. She stared at him, realizing the depth of his obsession. You think destroying this place will bring them back? She said softly. No, he said, but it will make sure no one ever forgets what was done. That night, Leah sat in her kitchen, staring at the envelope still sitting on her table. The eviction notice she hadn't opened completely. She unfolded it, her hands trembling. There it was in bold black letters. All residents must vacate within 14 days for redevelopment. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She didn't have anywhere to go. She didn't have money for a new place. Her father's old house was the only piece of her past she had left. And now even that was being taken. She thought about her neighbors, the people who once sneered at her, who laughed when the HOA fined her for having old paint on her porch. Now those same people were calling her at night, begging for help, asking if she knew what Ethan wanted. She didn't know what to tell them. She didn't understand it herself. She decided she couldn't sit still anymore. As the clock struck midnight, she put on her coat and stepped outside again. The air was cold, her breath visible in the dark. The construction site was lit up like a small city now, men working through the night under glaring floodlights. She slipped between the machines, careful not to draw attention. In the temporary office, she found new documents pinned to the wall, architectural sketches of tall glass buildings, luxury condos, and shopping centers. But there was one thing that made her heart stop. In the middle of the plans was a shaded area labeled Cross Memorial Plaza. And under it, in smaller writing, dedicated to the memory of Anthony and Rose Cross. She covered her mouth, realizing those names must be his parents. The place he hated, the people he despised. He was about to build a monument for the ones he lost, on the ashes of those who took them from him. A noise behind her made her jump. She turned and saw Ethan standing in the doorway. He wasn't angry, but there was something coldly knowing in his eyes. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. You'll only make this harder. Leah's voice broke as she spoke. Harder for who? For you or for everyone else? You're not helping your parents, Ethan. You're becoming like the people who hurt them. He stepped closer, his face inches from hers, his voice low and steady. Do you think I don't know that? Every night, I hear my father's voice. Every time I sign another paper, I see my mother's face. But this is the only way to make peace with what happened. I can't move on until this place is gone. Leah's eyes filled with tears. Then what about me? What about the people who never wronged you? He looked at her for a long time, his expression unreadable. You saved me once, he said quietly. That's why I'm giving you a chance to save yourself again. Leave before the week ends, Leah. When this is over, you'll understand. He turned and walked out, his footsteps fading into the hum of the machines. Leah stood frozen, the room spinning around her. She looked at the plans again, at the words Cross Memorial Plaza, and for the first time, She realized that Ethan's pain had become something far more dangerous than revenge. It had become purpose. And nothing could stop a man who believed his destruction was righteous. The next morning, the neighborhood woke to find fences extended, streets blocked, and signs posted at every corner. Construction zone. No entry. Panic spread like wildfire. Some families began packing. Others refused to leave, shouting at the workers, threatening lawsuits. But Ethan's men were everywhere, polite but immovable, always saying the same thing. Orders from Mr. Cross. Leah walked through the crowd, watching as fear consumed people who once boasted about their control, their perfect lawns, their rules. Now they had none. The world had turned upside down, and the man they once would have called a nobody now owned everything they feared losing. That evening, Leah saw a moving truck outside Mrs. Kendall's house. The once proud HOA president stood on her porch, tears streaking her makeup, yelling at two movers who ignored her. "You can't do this. This is my home," she cried. But the men didn't respond. Leah stood quietly across the street, watching her rival crumble. For a moment, she almost pitied her. Almost. Then Ethan's black car arrived, pulling up slowly. The door opened, and he stepped out, dressed in his usual calm authority. He didn't look at Mrs. Kendall. He looked at the house. Then he simply said, "Take it down." The movers stopped arguing and stepped aside as a demolition crew arrived. Mrs. Kendall screamed, grabbing Ethan's sleeve. "Please, I'll leave. Just don't destroy it." He looked at her hand gripping his suit, and for the first time, Leah saw a flicker of something dark cross his eyes. "You destroyed my family's home once," he said quietly. "Now you'll know what it feels like." He turned away, signaling his men, and within minutes, the machines roared to life. The sound of cracking would fill the air as Mrs. Kendall fell to her knees, sobbing. Leah turned away, unable to watch, but the sound stayed with her long after it was over. That night, the entire town buzzed with fear. No one slept. Leah sat in the dark, the glow of distant machinery painting her walls in orange light. Every noise outside made her flinch. She thought about leaving, packing a bag, and disappearing before it was too late. But something inside her wouldn't let her go. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was something deeper. A feeling that this wasn't the end yet, that Ethan's story wasn't complete, that he was still fighting with something inside him. When the first light of dawn touched the sky, Leah made her decision. She would confront him again, not as the woman who saved his life, but as the only person left who could remind him what that life was worth. Because she could see it in his eyes, even when he tried to hide it, the pain, the anger, and something else buried deep beneath it, something human he was trying to kill before it killed him. And she knew one thing for certain. If she didn't stop him now, there would be nothing left of the man she once saved. Only the shadow of someone who burned everything he loved to feel alive again. The sun rose behind gray clouds, its light cold and weak, barely touching the rooftops that now looked lifeless under a thin layer of dust. Leah stood on her porch, her eyes burning from a night without sleep. She could still hear the echo of last night's destruction in her head. The crack of wood, the shatter of glass, the cries of people watching their homes fall apart. Every sound stayed with her like a wound that wouldn't close. She didn't know what kept her there anymore. Fear, guilt, or something she couldn't name. But one thing was clear. She couldn't leave until she knew the whole truth. The man she once saved had turned into something unrecognizable, and she needed to understand why before it was too late. She wrapped her coat tighter and began walking toward the construction site, her boots crunching on the gravel. The morning air was sharp, the wind carrying the smell of metal and oil. Workers moved quietly, avoiding her eyes. They all knew who she was now, the woman Ethan Cross spoke to, the woman he warned to leave. To them, she was untouchable, but she felt anything but safe. She walked straight to the temporary office again, the one she had sneaked into before. No one stopped her this time. Inside, the lights were on, the walls lined with maps and papers. She searched the desk, her hands trembling as she flipped through files. Most of them were business contracts, numbers she didn't understand. But then she found a folder marked with a date 20 years ago. Her heartbeat quickened. She opened it slowly, and what she saw made her stomach twist. It was a black and white photo of a young man standing beside a small wooden house, smiling proudly with his arm around a woman and a little boy. She didn't need to read the names to know who they were. It was Ethan's family. The same house she'd seen in the old photograph was behind them. Her eyes moved down to the documents beneath, official letters from the old HOA board, stamped and signed, listing unpaid dues, violation notices, and final eviction warnings. At the bottom of one letter, she froze. The signature of the board chair was familiar: Robert Hayes. Her heart stopped. That was her father's name. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. The room spun as she stared at the page. Her father had been part of the HOA? He had signed the very paper that threw Ethan's family out of their home? She wanted to deny it, to believe it was another man. But the address printed beside the name matched her own house. Her father had lived here all his life. It was him. The truth hit her like a wave of ice. Her father had been one of the people who destroyed Ethan's family. The favor she thought she had done years ago, saving that stranger from the burning car, was not fate or chance. It was history folding back on itself, dragging both of them into the same place again. A sound at the door made her spin around. Ethan stood there, his face unreadable. He looked at the paper in her hand and then at her. "You found it," he said quietly. She couldn't speak. He stepped closer, the air between them heavy. "I wondered how long it would take you." She finally forced words out, her voice shaking. "My father. He was part of this?" Ethan nodded slowly. "He wasn't just part of it, Leah. He was the one who signed the final notice. He came to our house that day with your HOA board. I was 10 years old. I remember his voice telling my father he had 1 week to leave. My mother cried. My father begged. No one cared." His eyes flickered with something sharp. Pain, anger, maybe both. "The day we left, it rained just like it does now. I told myself someday I'd come back. Not for revenge, just for truth. But truth doesn't heal, does it? It burns everything left behind." Leah's chest ached as she looked at him. "You can't hold me responsible for what my father did," she said softly. Ethan's gaze dropped to the floor for a moment. "I know," he whispered, "but you carry his name. You live in his house. You keep the life he built from what he took." He looked up again, and for a heartbeat, she saw the man she once saved, the broken stranger from the wreck, the one who had looked at her with gratitude and fear. But that softness vanished as quickly as it came. "You saved me that night," he said, "and I thought maybe fate was giving me a second chance. But maybe it was giving you one, to face what your family did." Tears stung Leah's eyes. "So this is why you came here," she whispered. "Not to repay a debt, to punish me." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, punishment is easy. What I want is balance." He walked past her, looking out the window at the bulldozers lined up outside. "Every time one of those machines moves, I think of my father's hands shaking as he signed our surrender. He never forgave himself. Neither did I. So I built an empire big enough to own the people who once owned me. But when I came back, I didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect the person who saved my life to live in the house that destroyed it." The silence between them felt like a wall closing in. Leah tried to speak, but her voice broke. "If you destroy this place, you'll destroy what little good your parents believed in. My father was wrong, but you don't have to be." Ethan turned toward her, his face shadowed. "You think goodness matters here? This neighborhood was built on rules that ruined lives. Every brick, every fence, every smiling face hides something rotten underneath." He stepped closer, his voice a whisper now. "You don't fix rot by painting over it. You cut it out." Leah's hands trembled. "And what happens when there's nothing left to cut?" she asked. "When you've destroyed everything?" He didn't answer right away. For the first time, his mask cracked, and a flash of pain crossed his face. "Then maybe I can finally sleep," he said quietly. She looked at him, and in that moment, she saw how deep the wound ran. It wasn't revenge that drove him anymore. It was grief that had turned into obsession. He wasn't fighting the HOA or the past. He was fighting ghosts, and he didn't care if he burned himself to stop their voices. Leah stepped closer, her voice shaking but strong. You don't have to do this. You can build something good here, not destroy it. You can make this place right. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to find something to hold on to. But whatever hope he had once carried seemed already buried under years of anger. You still don't understand, he said. I didn't come here to build. I came here to end it. He walked out, leaving her alone in the cold office, surrounded by papers that smelled like dust and history. Leah sank into a chair, clutching the folder to her chest. She could feel her father's name burning through the paper like guilt made real. She didn't know how to face Ethan again, or what she could possibly say to change his mind. But she knew she had to try. If she didn't stop him, the last piece of her father's legacy, and maybe her own life, would be buried under the ruins of this town. Outside, the sky darkened again, thunder rumbling in the distance. The storm was returning. Leah walked home through the rain, her clothes clinging to her skin, her mind racing with memories she wished she could erase. She remembered her father sitting on their porch years ago, coughing, his hands rough and tired. He had told her once that he hated the HOA but had no choice. They own everything, Leah, he'd said. Even our pride. She never understood what he meant back then. Now she did. He had become part of the system that trapped them all, and in doing so, he had destroyed another family without even knowing it. When she reached her house, she saw a single car parked by the curb, Ethan's. Its headlights were off, but she could see him sitting inside, staring at her porch. She stopped, unsure whether to go closer. He rolled down the window slowly, his face half-lit by the dashboard light. You read it, he said. She nodded, too exhausted to pretend. I did. He looked down, then back at her. Do you hate him for what he did? He asked. Leah took a shaky breath. I hate what it made you become, she whispered. For a long time, neither of them moved. The rain fell harder, drumming on the hood of his car. Then, quietly, Ethan said, Tomorrow, everything ends. He rolled the window up, the car pulling away slowly, disappearing into the dark street. Leah stood there, drenched, her heart heavy with dread. Tomorrow. One word that sounded like a sentence. She looked around at the homes, the fences, the lights flickering behind curtains. In less than a day, all of it might be gone. She went inside, locked the door, and sat in the dark, staring at the photograph she had taken from his office. Ethan as a boy, smiling, innocent, unaware of what was coming. She traced her fingers over the picture, her tears mixing with the rain still dripping from her hair. I'm sorry, she whispered, though she didn't know if she was speaking to him, to her father, or to the ghosts of everything this neighborhood had lost. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying the faint hum of engines in the distance. Somewhere, deep in the night, heavy machines roared to life, and Leah realized Ethan had already begun. The demolition would start before dawn. She stood up slowly, her body trembling, her heart pounding with fear and resolve. She wasn't going to let him finish this, not yet. Because if Ethan truly believed he was ending his pain, he didn't know the kind of pain he was about to unleash on everyone else, including himself. The wind howled through the night like a warning from something older than the town itself, rattling the windows and sweeping through the empty streets where only the hum of generators and the blinking of red construction lights broke the darkness. Leah hadn't slept. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face behind the car window, his words echoing in her head. Tomorrow everything ends. She sat in her father's old armchair, clutching the photograph of Ethan's family against her chest, feeling her pulse race with each thunder roll outside. Her house creaked in the wind, old and weary, like it already knew it wouldn't see another morning. At 4 a.m., she rose from the chair and walked to the window. The storm clouds had thinned, but the horizon glowed faintly orange where floodlights marked the construction site. She could see the silhouettes of machines waiting like monsters asleep in the dark. Her stomach twisted with dread. She knew Ethan meant what he said. By sunrise, they would start tearing everything down. Her home, her street, the last piece of her father's life. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, whispering to herself that she wouldn't let it happen, not without facing him one last time. When dawn came, it arrived slowly, the sky pale and bruised with gray. The sound came next, a low rumble that grew into the roar of engines. Leah ran outside, her coat flapping in the cold wind. The streets were nearly empty except for a few people standing at a distance, helpless, watching as heavy machines rolled in one by one. A tall crane loomed over the HOA office, its shadow stretching across the street like a grave marker. Men in hard hats moved with precision, marking the ground, shouting orders. At the center of it all stood Ethan Cross, his black coat whipping in the wind, his expression calm as if none of this chaos touched him. Leah's breath caught when she saw him. He looked like he belonged there, commanding, powerful, distant, but also like a man standing at the edge of something he couldn't come back from. She didn't think. She just ran. Her boots splashed through puddles, her breath sharp in the cold morning air. A guard stepped forward, blocking her, but she pushed past him, shouting, "Ethan, stop this!" He turned, his eyes narrowing as he saw her running toward him. For a moment, the noise of engines faded, the world shrinking until it was only the two of them standing on the cracked asphalt between past and ruin. Leah stopped a few feet away, chest heaving, rainwater dripping from her hair. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice breaking. "You've proved your point. You own everything now. You've won." Ethan's gaze didn't soften. "You think this is about winning?" he said quietly. "This isn't a game, Leah. This is justice. This place took everything from my family. Every nail, every brick, every signature is a reminder of what they did." He looked past her toward the houses. "When I was a boy, I stood on that curb while they dragged our furniture out. My father begged for mercy. They laughed. The president of the board said, 'Rules are rules.' Now I'm rewriting them." Leah stepped closer, her heart pounding. "And what happens after you rewrite them? You'll still be alone. You'll still hear their voices in your head. Destroying this place won't silence them, Ethan. It'll only make their ghost stronger." His jaw tightened, his eyes dark. "You don't know what I've carried." "Then tell me," she said, desperate. "Tell me what's left to destroy before you destroy yourself with it." He stared at her for a long moment, the wind tearing between them. "You think I don't know what this makes me?" he finally said. "I wake up every day hating the man I've become, but I can't stop. It's like something inside me is pulling the strings now, and I'm just watching it happen. Every time I close my eyes, I see my mother crying in that doorway, and I see your father standing there, holding that paper." Leah flinched at the mention. "He's gone, Ethan. He can't answer for what he did. You're punishing the wrong people." Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "No, Leah, I'm punishing the right place." He turned away, signaling to his crew. The engines roared louder, the ground trembling as the first bulldozer moved into position. Leah ran forward, grabbing his arm. "If you do this, there's no going back," she cried. "You'll regret it for the rest of your life." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then into her eyes. For a brief second, she saw something crack behind his calm mask. Something human, fragile. "I already regret everything," he said. Without warning, the demolition horn blared, a long, low sound that cut through the morning like thunder. Leah turned as the first wrecking ball swung toward the old HOA office, the building that once ruled over their lives. The crash was deafening, dust exploding into the air like a scream. People gasped, some crying, others frozen in disbelief. Leah covered her mouth, tears spilling down her face. Ethan didn't move, didn't flinch. He just watched it fall, brick by brick, his eyes reflecting the chaos like mirrors. When it was over, the office was nothing but rubble, smoke rising from the ruins. Ethan exhaled slowly, as if releasing something he'd been holding for years. Leah looked at him, her voice trembling. "Is that what peace feels like?" He turned to her, his expression empty. "No," he said softly. "That's what nothing feels like." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. Then stop before you have nothing left. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked past her toward the crowd of workers waiting for the next order. Leah followed, shouting his name, but he ignored her until she stepped in front of him again, forcing him to stop. "You said I saved your life," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Then let me save it again. Please." Ethan's hand twitched at his side. "You can't," he said quietly. "That man you saved died the moment they took my home. All that's left now is what he became." Leah shook her head violently. "That's not true. I saw you that night. I saw the man who fought to live even when everything around him burned. He's still in there, Ethan. Don't lie to yourself." For the first time, his voice cracked. "You don't understand. I built this world to prove I was stronger than them. But standing here, I feel like that same scared kid again, watching the fire take everything." The sound of another machine starting up drowned their words, but Leah stepped closer, her voice firm, almost pleading. "Then don't let that boy become the monster they made you believe you had to be." The wind whipped around them, carrying the dust and the faint smell of gasoline. Ethan turned away, staring at the horizon where the rising sun cut through the smoke. "You think there's still something left to save?" he asked bitterly. Leah took his hand, the gesture small but brave. "I wouldn't still be here if there wasn't." For a long time he said nothing. The engines idled, waiting for his command. His men looked confused, uncertain. He stood perfectly still, torn between two worlds, the one he built from rage and the one she was offering through forgiveness. Finally, he pulled his hand free, his voice breaking the silence. "You should leave now." Leah shook her head. "Not without you." His eyes met hers, and in them she saw everything: anger, sorrow, exhaustion, and something deeper, a flicker of the man he once was. "Leah," he said, his voice soft as the wind. "If I stop now, everything I've done, everything I've lost, it'll mean nothing." She stepped closer, her voice trembling but fierce. "Then let it mean something different. Let it mean you finally found peace." He stared at her for a moment, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling. Then he turned toward the machines and raised his hand. For a heartbeat, Leah thought he was signaling to continue. But then he spoke, his voice firm and clear. "Shut it down." The workers froze, unsure if they heard right. "Shut it all down," he repeated. One by one, the engines fell silent. The rumble faded until only the sound of the wind remained. The neighborhood stood still, caught between destruction and deliverance. Ethan looked around, his shoulders sinking as if the weight of years had finally caught up to him. "It's done," he said quietly. Leah stepped closer, her tears mixing with the dust on her face. "You did the right thing," she whispered. He didn't answer, just stared at the ruins of the office. "No," he said softly. "I just stopped before I became what I hated most." The crowd began to disperse slowly, whispers spreading through the air. Some cheered quietly, others just stared, not knowing what to think. Leah stood beside Ethan as the sun broke through the clouds, the light hitting the rubble, turning the dust to gold. For the first time he looked tired, not angry, not cold, just human. He turned to her, his voice almost a whisper. "You should go rest. This place, it's over now." She shook her head. "It's not over, Ethan. You can still build something here. Not towers, not roads. Something real." He looked at her, eyes soft but haunted. "Maybe," he said, "but first, I need to remember what that even feels like." As the morning grew brighter, Leah watched him walk away from the ruins, his figure shrinking against the light until he disappeared behind the machines. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the calm after a storm that had taken too much. She knew this wasn't the end yet. Something deeper was still buried inside him, something he hadn't let go of. But for now, at least, the machines were quiet, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood could breathe again. The morning after the machines went silent, the neighborhood lay wrapped in an eerie calm that didn't feel like peace, only aftermath. Dust hung in the air, glowing gold in the sunlight that broke through the gray clouds. The ruins of the HOA office still smoked faintly, the ground scarred where walls once stood tall with pride. Leah stood at her porch, the world around her quiet for the first time in weeks. Yet she felt no relief, only emptiness. She couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. His eyes when he gave that final command, the tremble in his voice when he said it was done. She hadn't seen him since he walked away into the rising light, and part of her feared that the silence meant something worse than destruction ever could. The town had started to wake up again, people emerging from their homes, whispering about what would happen next, some daring to hope they might keep their houses, others too afraid to believe. But Leah didn't move. She just watched the road, waiting for the black car that never came. The day stretched long, the hours heavy, and as evening fell, the air grew thick with tension again, the kind that comes before something breaks. Just after sunset, headlights appeared at the far end of the street. Her heart skipped when she saw the sleek black car roll slowly down the lane, stopping in front of her gate. Ethan stepped out, no guards this time, no entourage, just him. He looked different. Tired, unshaven, his coat missing, his shirt sleeves rolled up. His face wasn't cold anymore, only worn, as if he'd aged years overnight. Leah stepped down from the porch slowly, her voice soft but trembling. "I thought you were gone." He looked at her for a long time before answering. "I was," he said simply. "But there's something I need to finish." His tone was calm, but behind it, something heavy moved, something final. She glanced past him, half expecting trucks or workers, but the street was empty. "If you're here to restart this," she said, "I won't let you." Ethan shook his head. "No more destruction," he said quietly. "That part of me's done. I came to set things right, the way I should have from the beginning." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a stack of documents bound together neatly. "These," he said, handing them to her, "are the deeds to every property in this neighborhood. Every house, every lot, including this one." Leah blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" He smiled faintly, the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. "I'm giving them back. To the people. Debt-free. No banks, no fees, no HOA, no control. The land belongs to those who live on it now. Forever." She stared at him, speechless. "You're giving it all away?" He nodded. "My lawyers finished the transfers this morning. By tomorrow it'll be official. I'm dissolving Cross Holdings' claim over this land completely." Leah shook her head in disbelief. "Why? After everything you did? After all the money, all the power, why would you just let it go?" Ethan looked past her at the ruins of the HOA office, his eyes distant. "Because I finally understood something," he said softly. "I thought revenge would make me feel free, but it only made me more trapped. Every time I tore something down, I built another cage around myself. But when you stopped me yesterday, I saw my mother's face again, not crying, not begging, smiling. It was like she was telling me to let it go. Maybe she already forgave the world long before I did." Leah felt tears sting her eyes. "You could rebuild here," she whispered. "Make this place into something your parents would have been proud of." Ethan nodded slowly. "I'm not staying," he said. "This town took everything from me once, but I won't let it take what's left of me now. I've arranged for a community trust to take over the land. You'll help run it." Leah blinked. "Me?" He smiled again, gentle and sad. "You're the only one who ever acted without wanting something in return. You saved my life, Leah. Now you can save theirs." She wanted to speak, to tell him he didn't have to go, but the words caught in her throat. He turned and looked around the street one last time. "Funny," he murmured. "This place used to make me feel small. Now it feels like a memory." He started toward his car, and she followed, her steps quick, her voice breaking. "Ethan, wait. Where will you go?" He paused, his hand on the car door. "Somewhere quiet," he said. "Somewhere I can build without ghosts watching." She stepped closer. "You don't have to do it alone." He turned then, his eyes meeting hers under the dim streetlight. "I've been alone a long time, Leah, but you made me remember what it felt like not to be." He hesitated. as if he wanted to say more, but then he just nodded and got in the car. The engine started, the headlights flaring bright against the dark. Leah stepped back, the papers still in her hands, the wind tugging at their edges. The car rolled forward slowly, the sound fading as it turned the corner and disappeared from sight. She stood there until the night swallowed everything, the weight of silence pressing down again. She looked at the papers, her hands shaking, then at the neighborhood around her. The cracked roads, the half-destroyed fences, the broken signs. And then she smiled through her tears. For the first time, this place didn't feel like a cage. It felt alive, free. She walked to the center of the street, the cool wind brushing her hair, and whispered into the darkness, "Thank you." Somewhere far away, maybe on another road under the same gray sky, Ethan might have heard it. Days passed, and the town began to heal. The machines were gone, replaced by workers repairing what was left, but now they worked with care, not fear. The neighbors who once avoided each other now shared coffee on their porches, helping one another repaint fences and clear debris. The HOA signs were gone, their rules erased, replaced by something simpler, respect. People started calling the area Cross Haven, a name Leah didn't argue with. Every morning, she walked past the empty lot where the office once stood. Flowers had begun to grow there, wild and bright, planted by someone who didn't want to forget. Sometimes she'd stop, close her eyes, and listen to the quiet, half expecting to hear the sound of an engine in the distance. One evening, months later, as the sun dipped low and turned the sky orange, Leah stood by the small garden near her porch. A delivery man approached, holding a box addressed to her. Inside, she found a letter sealed in black wax and a small silver key. The letter was written in Ethan's handwriting. "Leah," it said, "by now the land should be yours. Take care of it. Build something that lasts not in stone, but in people. The key is to a place by the lake outside town. It's yours now. I thought you'd like quiet too." There was no address, but she knew exactly where he meant. The old lake road where she had saved him all those years ago, the place where everything began. She went there that weekend, driving down the narrow road lined with tall grass and the sound of crickets singing in the dusk. The lake shimmered under the fading light, calm and endless. At the edge stood a small wooden cabin, freshly built, simple but beautiful. She unlocked the door with trembling hands. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and rain. On the table sat a single framed photograph, Ethan as a boy with his parents, smiling. Beside it lay another note. "Sometimes the only way to make peace with the past is to give it away." Leah sat down, tears falling silently, and for the first time in a long time, she felt peace. Back in the town, people still told the story of the billionaire who came to destroy their homes but instead gave them back everything he owned. They called him cruel, kind, broken, brilliant. Everyone had their version. But Leah never corrected them. She just smiled, knowing the truth was simpler and heavier than words. He hadn't come back to take revenge. He had come to bury his pain where it was born, to end the circle his life had been trapped in. And maybe, somewhere out there, he was finally free. On quiet nights, when the wind brushed through the trees, Leah would step outside, close her eyes, and imagine him standing by the lake, watching the stars the way he once watched the flames. And she'd whisper softly to the dark, "You kept your promise. You returned the favor." And in that moment, for both of them, the world felt whole again.